Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear a presentation from Peter Rousonelos from Meristem Crop Performance at our post-harvest meeting we had yesterday. Meristem products can enhance your seed investment in convenient, unique ways. All available from your local Merschman Seeds dealer for 2025.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you having me here. And real quick, in 21 is when I joined Meristem. Meristem's been around since about 2019. So we're a young company, only 6 years old. We still consider ourselves a startup. We work like a startup, which means we're kind of crazy. But we're solid foundation. I am a part owner in it. We Brandt Consolidated. If anybody's familiar, has anybody heard of Brandt Consolidated before? They're in Illinois. They're in the retail business, but they're in the specialty micronutrient business, and they're global, and they're privately owned. So they actually are partners with us. They own a minority share of our company as well, and that's been a big springboard for us to be able to have best-in-class formulations, have good access to trials and validity, and be able to validate the things that we do work. We get access to a lot of people that we otherwise wouldn't within our type of organization, so we can go do what we like to do, which is spend time with customers. So real quick, the things that we're involved in, like I said, we're in that crop additive space, and what does that mean? Nutrient use efficiency, you hear that a lot, right? NUE. We try not to wear that phrase out too much, or that acronym out, but it is an acronym you hear a lot. And when we look at that, we think, how can we best manage the nutrients you're putting out, NPK and otherwise. And we do utilize biologicals. You hear us talk about biologicals. We're not a biological company. What you'll find from us is we're more of a biological delivery company. There's a lot of biologicals out there, right? What works, what doesn't work. What we do is we segment those. We figure out what's performing a certain function, and if it's performing that function, why do I need it? And then once we decide we need it, how do we best deliver it so that you can actually use it, and it's not something you're dragging a refrigerator out to the field, or you're trying to figure out, hey, is this stuff alive for 2 days, 10 days, 30 days? Is it even going to be viable when I get it to the seed? But that's where we spent a lot of our time and energy around developing innovation to better deliver to the biology. So when you hear me talk about some of those products, some of those things can change as we move forward, just like seed, right? Hybrid that's good 3 years from now, it's going to change probably into something else going forward. So this market's going to continue to evolve as well. And it's pretty exciting, really, the things that are coming into it. So we're looking at biofriendly nitrogen management, unlocking nutrients that are tied up in your crop residue, and building healthy soils. Then we're big on getting plants off to a good start. That's probably the most critical thing. I mean, I'm not going to speak for the David Hulas or the Randy Dowdies or the Kelly Garrett's, the Extreme Ag groups. You got your influencer high yield guys. The number one thing that they talk about is getting off to a good start. I mean, that's the number one thing I always hear consistently. Is your planter set right? Have you spent the time to make sure that it's set right? What are you doing to influence that emergence, early vigor, even establishment, getting that plant up to canopy as quick as possible? Because that plant is a storage organ, right? It's out there to take up as much nutrition and utilize sunlight as much as possible. And the quicker we can do that, and the most evenly we can do that, the better off we're going to be in the end. And then once we do that, how do we optimize in-season genetic potential? Kind of like what we talked about, managing in-season. We've got this crop. We've done all these things right. Now what do we do to kind of push it through the finish line and finish the game strong? The other thing we're about is kind of more on a retail side. We also work with seed dealers. We do work with the retail portion as well. We look at kind of ways that we can reduce waste by not shipping water. So we've got some other innovations where we locally blend and make some starter fertilizers and adjuvant products as well that just helps take some cost out, which leads down to the grower. That we're looking to just again drive real productivity gain. So this is what it looks like when we put together I heard a guy yesterday I was talking to say it's kind of like a playbook. That's what he calls it. It's like playing football, right? You got your playbook. And if you run your playbook, usually it works out. Unless you're a Chicago Bears fan. Then it's tough, which that's me. So the quarterback's not the problem. Anyway, okay, I'm done with that. So I'm also a Cubs fan, so you can feel sorry for me. the rest of this meeting. I've only had one good win. I remember 1985. I was 10 years old. So I do remember the Bears winning. And 2016 was a big deal in my life when the Cubs won. Unfortunately, my grandfather never got to see it. But hey, it's like farming. Next year's going to be a better year. That's what I grew up thinking with the Cubs. You know, so when we always think next year is going to be better, next year is going to be different, as a Cub fan, I can tell you, it's going to be different. It might not be great, but it's going to be different, right? And so that's why when I look at these, at what we try, how we manage it, and why that playbook is there, is because we don't know what next year is going to be like. What we do know, and so I talk about, I say, you know, I try not to, I'll use the word argue. I try not to argue about what I don't know. I try to talk about what I do know. What I do know is there are key times that we can influence yield. There are key times that we can mitigate stress. And the other thing I do know is that there will be stress. What form it's in, I don't know, right? Wet, cold, hot, dry, disease pressure, whatever the case may be. Ben showed some pictures that look like there's some stress out there and sometimes this past crop year. Good crop year overall, but definitely still faced with stresses. So we look at that playbook and say, look, post-harvest, I had a grower in DeKalb, Illinois, probably 15 years ago, changed my thought process on the growing season. I was sitting with them in the combine, we're going back and forth, and they farmed this area that kind of had a whole section, and they had all this stuff going on. They had across the road, he had a tillage tool going, and actually in the other kind of quarter section across the road, they were spreading fertilizer and lime products, and then and then we were harvesting where we were, and there's a guy running a shredder actually in a field right near us too, and I said, Mike, this is you guys got a lot going on right here. He says, I said, you're keeping right up close to the combine. He says, and he's got, you know, cutting head and all that. And he says, and they were heavy corn on corn. He says, Peter, he says, planting season starts right now. He goes, that's why we're doing it. He says, what I'm doing right now impacts my opportunity, my yield opportunity for next year. I said, dig into that a little bit. What do you mean? He says, how I manage my residue. How I treat my fields after I'm done harvesting them. How is that going to impact, you know, getting back in next year? You know, and he just, as I thought through that, I was like, you know, he's exactly right. Right? Sometimes we just go get that crop out and think, okay, I'll deal with what I need to in the spring, what comes at me. And he's thinking, how can I best manage it, set myself up for success to mitigate those risks going into spring. And so he's trying to get a lot of that stuff done as quick as possible. But I say that because, you know, after harvest here, we can move that excavator, for example, product to, you know, here, or it could be down in front where we plant. But that's a way to manage residue. We'll get into that a little bit. Then we've got our planter box treatment, a starter type product, getting that plant off to a good start. And then really we select a couple of products. We try to make it very simple, and we give you the reasons why. We're utilizing products configurations in the early V stages. Why would that be? We're piggybacking that fungicide space, right? Herbicide space. We get into tassel, we're piggybacking that reproductive space. And then if you're really, really going for it, and John can elaborate on this a little bit, there might be a couple more times you can apply product as you get later. That's a little bit more progressive, but I will tell you in a lot of our operation, we are applying fungicide and certain nutrition products twice, pre and post tassel. Drones have kind of become a cool thing. Is anybody messing with drones? Too much of that? There is quite a bit going on with drones, and I think there's some exciting opportunities coming through that space to give you the opportunity to maybe even take some of these practices and you can try them at minimum in some places where you might say, hey, I might be worth messing with that. And if you've got questions on that, that's why I say grab one of us afterwards and ask away. Same thing with soybeans. You'll see a lot of similar products. It's because we're trying to do the same thing. We're influencing the same processes in the plant. So won't spend a lot of time on this slide since I did on the corn, but in general, playbook. One thing I will push on is right here. You see where it says 25% yield can be impacted through in-season nutrition is what I'll call it. That actually come from Brandt Consolidated. They've got a research farm that's 320 acres down in Pleasant Plains, Illinois, which is really, really good ground. So you think sometimes, yeah, that's really good ground. I don't farm that. Well, really good ground is hard to impact yield in season as much as less desirable. So if they can do it, then it's going to be that much more impactful on less desirable, if I say it that way. And that's including a high management practice up to the planter. So what they do is and University of Illinois does this as well. They do maximum. I can't remember what they call it. They do maximum, and then they pull one thing away at a time. They don't do, we're going to do this one thing and see what it does. We're going to do this one more thing and see what it does. They run a maximum program, and then they test it by pulling certain things out, and they watch that yield continue to drop down. Number one, planting date. Number one way to influence yield, planting date. Obviously hybrid. And then really, it's how you manage it at that point, the establishment and the things. But 25%, when they pulled out all in-season nutrition and fungicide, 25% of yield reduction. And that's over 14 years. And it's very consistent. So that's where this in-season management is something we preach pretty heavy. I kind of relate it back to, analogy I use, which is I don't wake up in the morning and eat all the food I'm going to eat all day for the rest of the day, right? I'd feel pretty sluggish to start, and I'd have some kind of sugar attack by about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you'd crash. So, we're looking to, we got to provide a lot of food up front because that's when we logistically need to get it done. But then how can we manage and spoon feed that crop the rest of the season for maximum potential? So fertility, we'll jump through a few products, but conceptually, I just want to kind of set the stage for you as to how we think and why we're promoting this systems approach. But as we think about fertility applications, want to talk about stover. That doesn't mean you have to be no-till. Is there much no-till in here? Much? Yeah, some. There's no-till, there's reduced tillage, there's turning the dirt black. It just depends what where you farm and why you're using those practices. But in general, no matter what it is, when you're looking at residue in a field, you're looking at a fertilizer bank, right? There's a lot of fertility in that residue, whether it's corn or soybeans or wheat, depending on your crop rotation. And whether you work it or don't work it, if you work it, where's all that residue at? The upper 2, maybe 4 inches of the soil profile. I was in ag retail, and the number one thing I hated, and don't take offense if you've done this, my job was to kill weeds. And you get that late season where the weeds are all that tall because you didn't get out there, it was wet. Let's pick on 2019, let's pick on 2009, that was fantastic, 2010. Weeds got really tall, guys go out and work them, right? Before the chemical guy got there, right? So then they're all worked, and what happens? They're all worked and they're just scattered about all over the field. Some of them got good old hooks in them. And then you go spray them and half the weeds don't die because it doesn't take the chemistry up. I use that example because even though all those weeds are there and even though it worked it, where'd they end up at? They're all still kind of just spread around. With residue, it's not a lot different. We work it and it's all still there, in the upper inches. We're not flipping it over anymore, right? We're not burying that residue anymore. So the good part about that is we can access that fertility. And when you think about accessing that fertility, you think to yourself, some will think, well, I'm going to get that fertility sooner or later that's out there, Peter, so I'm not worried about that. Yes, you're right. But you may not access it when you need it. Because if that mineralizes and it's a slower season or a faster season, that's going to change things and how it mineralizes. But if it mineralizes, you're going to have that availability maybe come in July or August. Some of it might be September, October. The crop needs it at certain stages, especially during early reproductive stage. So if we can narrow that window, bring about some of that fertility in season, you can actually utilize some of that as an offset to your fertility spend. We're not saying don't put on fertilizer. That's not the message here. I think there's a marriage. We call it biology as fertility, which is utilize commercial fertilizer, but then also think about how you can layer in making sure you're maximizing what's out there in the field because it is of high value. And if you don't have the opportunity to capture it in season, what happens is if potassium becomes K++, it can get away and start to leach. So you actually can lose it. Phosphorus, it won't move, but it'll tie back up. And then you start the process over again, trying to get it back available. So there is real value in the field. So that's why I want to touch on here and wanted to set the stage for why we talk about it as a fertility spend. Real quick, this kind of it's a busy slide. In the end, commercial fertilizers, again, good, but inefficient, right? I mean, you put out $100 worth of fertilizer, you're going to get $15 this year out of P&K for the most part. Doesn't mean don't do it. It means just know that, right? So there's an opportunity to offset some of that spend. What we've done in a lot of cases, and what a lot of our growers have done and customers, is they say, hey, here's my budget. I'm going to spend this much on fertilizer, so I want to make sure, so I'm going to put XYZ of dollars towards P and K, or maybe it's a little bit towards K, whatever the case is in your own farm, but then I'm going to allocate some spend to make sure I maximize what I got in my stover in the field. So this, as we look at that and how we put biologicals to work, we talk about a guiding principle is that crop residue is a fertilizer spend. This is some of the information where we get that. University of Illinois is most conservative. Actually, I've looked at Nebraska, I looked at Iowa. They're actually higher than this in values. So again, since we kind of work with the University of Illinois on the biological side, I use their data. This is what you got out there in the field: 200 pounds of corn, or 200 bushel corn, 250, 300. You can see here, there's a lot of value. The one I like to point at is the potassium, 104 pounds of K. How many struggle with potassium in season? You can put on 200 pounds of potash, and you know what? Still don't get potassium in season. Potash is KCl, high in chloride, high in salt. It actually impacts your biological activity. We've done the work, but doesn't mean don't use it, but it also means it's not the most efficient form of potassium, and you're not always going to get it. I've traveled from the Rocky Mountains to Delmarva. I was in Minot, North Dakota yesterday, so yes, you can feel sorry for me. It was freezing cold. It is winter up there. I almost went sideways on the interstate. So, so I'm glad to be back in Iowa. But they, you know, it's, what was I going with that? I apologize. So the potassium, that's what it was. The potassium, when I travel around, this is a big question I ask. Do you struggle with potassium uptake? Yeah. Can't seem to get potassium, right? We can look at base saturations and, you know, potassium, magnesium, and that kind of thing. But in the end, that is a consistent struggle. So I look at that. When I was around this product, I got most excited about the fact that we can influence potassium uptake in season, and I'll show you that here in a minute. What is the product? It's Excavator AMS. What makes it different? Not the biology. So that's something I like to dispel right away. There's a lot of products on the market, and a lot of those products will have probably some strains of this in there. They may not show them, they might show them. They might have higher CFU count, they might not. In the end, these biologicals are selected from the bioremediation industry, which means they break down carbon. Back when Exxon Valdez spilled in the ocean, I was younger and I used to think they used some kind of fancy equipment to clean it up, but they use biology to consume the carbon, get it out of the water. That's where this comes from. So this is pedestrian biology. It's just we know what it does. So you select those strains, put it in there, and then really what creates the magic is, again, how do we best deliver it? A lot of these products are putting them in water, or maybe it's a sugar source, or whatever the case may be. Well, they don't survive very well. The CFU count, this is not a regulated industry. The CFU count might say, this is what it is on the jug, but what's the CFU count when it gets to the field? It's probably different, because it goes through some other processes. It's in the jug, it goes into your spray tank. How long was it on the shelf? All of those things. So we focused on, in that guaranteed analysis, we call that microbialized, which is we actually have a provisional patent, it's pending. Hoping to get that through, where we've found a way through Brandt and a gentleman that used to work for Winfield that has spent his entire career building adjuvants. The best way to deliver them, keep them alive in the jug, keep the pH low so you don't have to worry about a vented product, and so it'll mix with herbicides and your other components in your tank, and get to the point of contact with full CFU count spread evenly across the field. So that's I want to really highlight that, because that's something that really separates Excavator AMS from a lot of the products in this space. The other is we have AMS in there. That AMS source, so no different than utilizing bagged AMS. It's been formulated into it. There's 3.4 pounds per gallon, just like you'd find in like a liquid AMS product. So that AMS is there as an additional food source that's built into the product, and also something that gives you an all-in-one. If you're using this like in spring and you want to incorporate it into a burn down application, you actually wouldn't need your AMS or NAS surfactant in that case. This would give you some convenience that way. This just kind of highlights what I just talked about. Getting to some pictures. This is out in western Iowa. First year that I messed with it was spring of 22, because like I say, I joined in 21. And the farmer out there, actually I'll just say it, farmer, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Extreme Ag or Kelly Garrett. That gentleman, I've known him for a long time, before he really got big with that stuff, but he's got a residue problem. They farm in a lot of hills and high yield corn. You know, you hear about the high yield stuff, but their farm average is still, it's not, you know, maybe some of the yields you hear about from an average, but their yields are still really strong, over 200. And in those hills out there, and they don't do any tillage, very minimal. And so they have a residue problem. And they go corn after corn after corn. There are not a lot of beans anymore. And this is I came to him with an excavator and I said, give it a try. And first thing he did was say, Peter, come on. We've known each other a while. I've used these products before. He says, I'm just not getting a lot of great results. I said, give it a whirl. And I told him why. He'd been using extract from Nutrien, not picking on him. I actually sold for him for years when I was in retail. It's a good product. He used that, he was using that. So theirs is untreated. They pulled the pictures May 24th. These are from them. Extract applied April 26th in the spring, and they pulled these April 24th. You can see there's some activity, starting to break that pit down in the center. And then excavator applied May 13th, pulled 10 days later, 11 days later, and you can see the difference. They did get a little bit of rain. We need a little bit of water to help activate this product. But this gives you an idea just how fast it can work. And that's because of the microbialize. That's that carrier I was talking about. And that's how it impacts the performance of the product. And so they have been committed to it ever since. From a farmer perspective, they do have a dealership as well where they sell some product. They're probably one of our highest volume customers. Very, very happy with this and how this has been performing. A few more pictures. What I like to point at here is you kind of see these are older, and I still use them because we used to highlight the residue. We used to talk about the fact that on the without, there's a lot of residue there between the rows. With, there's not as much. We still talk about that, but where did the nutrition go? Because you see a difference in plant height, right? That plant is a storage organ for nutrition, so to move sugar to the grain later during reproductive stage. So think about it as like a side dress pass. We side dress nutrients in farming, right? We've been doing that with nitrogen for quite a few years, but we're not doing that with potassium and phosphorus and other things like that. Plant takes up a lot of nutrients through the roots. So if we can apply this in the fall, if it works out, or really you can apply it in the spring with your first pass chemistry, there's no harm to that. That's what was done there in western Iowa. What you're doing is you're mineralizing and influencing the uptake of additional nutrients in season, and you're doing that, and it's going to come available in about 45 to 60 days, which is like a side dress pass. So if you think about it that way, that's how you're influencing that nutrient and how you're better using it. We did some trials to prove this out. We had, whether we like it or not, sustainable agriculture and some of the things that are happening are driving some practice changes too, politically, but not only politically, but McDonald's just recently signed a deal with a customer we know. Walmart signed a deal. This customer here, they do a lot of work with PepsiCo, so they're in the potato business, but they also have corn and soybeans. And so they were told that they have to reduce their need on fertilizer, and if not, they're going to lose their contract. So for French fries and chips and other things they do with them. So they got a hold of us and said, what can we do? So we said, let's give this a whirl. We think we can impact your nutrient availability with excavator. So we kind of collaborated, spent quite a bit of money, 96 trials replicated. There were some PhDs and other really smart people involved. And it was applied in the spring. And then we measured nutrient release, timing and use, tissue tested and soil tested every 2 weeks. The dots represent every 2 weeks. So starting, and actually these need to be updated because it goes all the way out to harvest. And it's very consistent, but the red is untreated, the blue is treated. And you can see here where the lines kind of run concurrently, and then you get about 45 to 60 days in, and you see the spike, right? So where's that spike? That corn's about late V stages, beans are about R1. Same thing with nitrogen. You see that little dip in the beginning. Why is that? Carbon and nitrogen ratios, right? We're trying to narrow the gap on those so we can mineralize more nitrogen. We're doing it quicker. We increase the population, feed that food source, and then surge, and we get more nitrogen availability when we need it, which again is towards those critical reproductive stages. Phosphorus, we see it all season long, from start to finish. Potassium, again, my most exciting one. we consistently see a big spike right in front of reproductive stages. That's when I want it. When does the plant want it? Right? Plant wants all those nutrients as it leads into reproductive stages. So that timing aligns. Potassium is actually higher than nitrogen in corn for demand for a period of time in front of right at reproductive stages. Real quick here, University of Illinois, the other thing they'll tell you, and I didn't know this till I think it was last year, is the nutrients that come out of your stover, come out of any organic material, are actually 3 times more efficient than what you can do with commercial fertilizer. Doesn't mean commercial fertilizer can't be used. I sold it for years. I'm a believer in it. But anything we can do to increase this, that plant can utilize 3 times more efficiently what's inside the plant. So the reason this is red at 69 is because they basically took what tons are available out of stover and times it by 3 as far as the nutrient, what that pounds per ton that we could get, right? So think about that. If you've got 20 pounds of potassium we can release out of your stover, it's like having 60 pounds of K. This is independent. This is just anecdotal. Customer that did a wide, multiple trial locations. They combined them together. They did spring applied. They saw a 40% reduction in dry weight by the end of the season. This was what they measured in nutrients: 24 pounds of N, 7 pounds of phosphorus, 19 pounds of K, and about 1 pound of sulfur. So those are real values, right? That's something that you think about that from a cost substitution. That's worth quite a bit of money. Just more anecdotal, we had some yield increases, but the big one here, this was fall applied. They had 20 more pounds of phosphorus, 65 more pounds of potassium at planting season. This is a farmer that sent us this year out of Wisconsin. They said 5 to 7 bushel less without excavator. I had to read that multiple times when I got it because I started thinking 5 to 7 bushel less with excavator, and I thought, what? But this is a weird way to word it, but that was hey, this is from them. And so they were cutting soybeans, and they said that where they put on excavator, basically they were getting 5 to 7 bushel better. And again, that comes down to nutrient availability. We don't push a yield message strong in the excavator. We're trying to push a fertility message. And if then you can substitute some cost out, spend the same amount of money as you would have, and then it leads to that increased yield, that's excellent. Again, if you're thinking tillage, how does that impact me? Great, I hear what you're saying, but I turn it black, I rip my ground. Tested that too. And actually, across all tillage passes in this yield environment in central Illinois, they saw increases across all tillage practices. Again, the only one that's not in here is moldboard plow. We obviously don't see much of that anymore. And then how we can impact it is taking cost out. We look at, hey, how can you offset your costs? There's lots of ways to do it. So consider excavator AMS this season as part of your program. And the other thing I mentioned is if you're doing cover crops, great companion when you're terminating cover crops. You'll actually terminate. We won't harm the crop, a living crop, with excavator AMS. But when you're terminating cover crops, utilizing herbicide, we do a better job of getting the herbicide into that crop. You get a good kill and actually starts to break that crop down and cycling those nutrients to be used this year. The planter pass I'll jump through. Our hybrids, we're planting them thicker. We're getting smaller root systems because of it. We talk about microenvironments. We're trying to influence anything we can do around this root ball to influence root development and nutrient availability, right? Kind of right around microenvironment. I think about strip till. Strip tills become very popular in some areas, and it's because we're putting that nutrition right underneath that plant, right where it can use it, so it's more efficient. We can sometimes use less for that reasons. We're more concentrated. The plant gets to access it versus it doesn't know what's going on out here, right? It's only right here. So how can we influence and turn that into that and influence nutrient availability around that root zone? So we utilize the Revline hopper throttle products, as we call it. Some of you probably heard of them. It's a planter box treatment where the innovation we have, and we have a patent on the delivery mechanism, is that we deliver biological technologies through the biocapsules, and those are located in the top of that lid. And when you go to plant, you deploy it, you plunge that button, it drops into the base of the pail, you shake it up, you add it to your planter just like you would talc graphite.
Why is it important to release that at planting?
It's It's important to release that at planting so that you know that you have great questions. So you know you have viable biology. Because some of this biology won't live more than a few days. It's very sensitive. And we've done the coverage work and we've done the CFU testing. And the reason we came up with this innovation, I'll call it, is because, to be honest, to give some confession, we sold a talc graphite product that had some biology in it from another company 4 years ago, and stuff was dead. We tested it. We got it out there, and fortunately we sold it with something else as like a co-pack, and that stuff really brought a lot of value because it was alive, because it was co-packed. But the stuff inside there, we sent it off to a lab over the summer. We didn't come back with anything, any live CFU counts. And we thought, we can't do this. We can't sell the farmer dead biology that you're not getting any value from. That's why we're seeing these inconsistencies out here. So that's when we said, we got to find a way to deliver, house that biology, deliver it to where, so that the farmer can, when the farmer uses it, you're getting viable biology on the seed that's going to perform for you every year. The product, real quick, Revline Hopper Throttle Corn with ether. This is kind of our go-to. We're giving you talc graphite, iron manganese. We're giving you zinc, and the equivalence in that zinc is actually equivalent to 1.2 quarts. We've done all the tissue testing. Very, very efficient. It's right on seed, so you can be very confident that you're delivering what you would like to deliver in a quart of zinc. If you don't have starter fertilizer, we know the value of zinc is high at seed, at plant. And then we're utilizing enzymes to solubilize phosphorus quicker, some biology to solubilize nutrition and help fixate some N. And then we basically use a product that we call Terrasim that we license from New Leaf that colonizes on the root system. It's a biostimulant. It really, really helps with root development, not only early, but throughout the whole growing season. So the biggest value there is that root hair redevelopment, which is critical as we get into late stages when we're trying to take up more water and nutrients, which helps mitigate a lot of stresses. Same thing with soybeans. The corn product treats 50 units, so kind of lines with a Pro Box. If you do bags, one scoop, 1 unit, it does have a scoop with it. Soybeans treats a Pro Box of beans, same thing, 1 scoop, 1 unit. Very similar, talc graphite in the base, iron manganese zinc, and then we're delivering a little different biology package. It's geared more towards soybeans for nutrient availability. We deliver an enzyme that increases soluble phosphorus, the biostimulant, but then actually we deliver, because of what John said, why do we deliver that biology at the planter? Inoculant, we have found a lot more success with nodulation, increasing nodules, healthier nodules when we deliver the inoculant through the planter box treatment versus doing it through a liquid seed treatment in a lot of cases, because you just get rid of a lot of the factors that can harm that inoculant. We did do coverage work in case you're wondering. It all sounds great. Must be a controlled spill. It does look like a controlled spill, but we actually have done a ton of work on coverage. We work with Advanced Agrolytics, if anybody's heard of them. AIP, they have a company called AIP that they own. They do all the testing for us. I can go into that for an hour and I won't, but in the end, it does cover, and it covers very well. They test it 20, 50, and 80% through the field. We test the cultures. Every time we add anything to this product, we always retest, and every year we do coverage work. So very, very confident you're getting the coverage work. We go off of John Deere specs when it comes to fluency, and we work with Precision as well, and they've tested our product. So we're very sensitive to the fact that it's a good lubricant for your planter, and that we're not going to hinder that at all, and that it covers very well, and we've accomplished both of those things. This comes out of Precision in Illinois. We talk about emergence and how critical it is. They did this test for us in 23. You can see they established more ears or more plants on day 1 where they used the product versus without it, and then you can see as it goes down through day 4, you can see what that led to in yield for them. And you can see the difference in those years, right? They start to become almost weeds after a couple days. And so we want to narrow that window as much as possible and even out emergence. Zinc is a huge factor in that. If you've got zinc in a product, whether it's soybeans, corn, wheat, if you got zinc in there, zinc narrows that germination window. And that's a big reason we get that earlier emergence and that zinc component that's in that product. We call it an ion lock zinc. It is unique. It helps adhere to the seed, and it's very efficient, and we see this response and why we're so excited to have that zinc formulation in there. When you have zinc in there and you utilize an enzyme that we use to solubilize phosphorus, you get more phosphorus uptake early. What do we talk about? Plants are it's cold early. We don't get a lot of phosphorus uptake. This will really help influence phosphorus uptake early. So we'll jump through that. I talked a little bit about that. The power of the enzymes. We're trying to mobilize unavailable phosphorus to available phosphorus. Because all that matters is soluble P. Right? If you got fixed P, that doesn't mean anything. It just means you got a lot of unavailable P. I'm from University of Missouri. My daughter goes there, so I spend money there, so I feel like I can use their quotes. They said 800 to 2,000 pounds of total phosphorus per acre is fixed, not to be available by plants. So that's a lot of fertilizer. So what can we do to solubilize some of that? That's where these enzymes in the planter box and another product we'll talk about quick touches on that and how we can influence that activity. So really good root development where we do that as well early. We'll kind of just jump through this. Just some yield data quick on soybeans. You know, why would I do that on soybeans? We feel like soybeans are a little less managed at the planter, and we still see really, really good results where we utilize the planter box on soybeans just from a yield component versus a traditional method. Iowa State, we're in Iowa, so I got to put this up here. Iowa State last year, and I got one going to Iowa too, so I send money to Iowa. So I'm you know, can't hate me for any reasons. Right? I'm from Illinois, but I got money going to Iowa State, money going to Missouri. So hopefully I've covered everybody. But we did, Iowa State did some testing for us last year. Huge results. We're not saying you're going to go out here and get 10 bushel, but this is their data. We were wildly excited to have it. Some stuff from the field this year. Adam Darrington, he's in Iowa, works for us. He got this from a grower that did a plot, you know, anywhere from 2.7 to 18.9 bushel increases with soybean hopper throttle across all these. We had an 8 in this was in Missouri actually, and they tested it against a competitive product, a couple bushel better than a competitive product and 8 better than untreated. Some corn stuff in central Illinois where we saw some big improvements. Some corn here. I think this was 5.5 average. This is southern Indiana. This is Alex Bond. Some of you may have met Alex before at some other grower meetings, but he works with us in southern Illinois, parts of Missouri, and southern Indiana. These are some results he got from a grower. We love grower testimonies. Celebrate the grower, not try to celebrate ourselves. And he's seeing 3.5 to 4 bushel with the hopper throttle with ether. Again, so this one I wanted to point out because sometimes we think about, well, I did this, but maybe it didn't end in this result. Well, if there's no stress present, sometimes we see the result, sometimes we don't. Where we have a significant wind event, that's what this was. Wind and hail event coming across Iowa. This is southwest Iowa. 18 bushel. And that was just because it took that event better than the other. Is it normally 18 bushel? Would have been 18 bushel if we didn't have the wind event? Maybe not. Maybe it had been 2, maybe it had been 0, maybe it had been 5. But it was 18 under that stress. And we typically get some wind events. More and more, it seems like. So we're setting that crop up for success earlier. We do have, as they mentioned, a corn rootworm product. So if with the Power Core products, I know that management is not available below ground, but they're really good yielding products. So versus try to say, hey, I've got to go get that smart stack or that trait to better manage my, I've got some corn rootworm or I'm concerned about it. We're very confident to be able to bring this through. This is an EPA biocontrol. So, and we can bring it through the planter box, and it's been working excellent. Basically, it just works by cutting off the signal that corn rootworm can't find the root, therefore it can't feed, and it dies. We call it suppression. We think we're leading more and more to control. So I would say it's a great way to manage your traits. If you got high pressure and you're using traits and you're using insecticide, you can be very confident pulling the insecticide out, substituting that cost, and you'll find you'll save yourself some money by utilizing the Gardex and be happy with the performance. Just some data, but basically visually from the field, these were some things we got in some high pressure environments where they did use insecticide against the Gardex, and we were seeing as good or better root development with the Gardex. What I would tell you is insecticide has a half-life. It only lasts so long, where Gardex colonizes on the roots, and this is something you'll get season long. So you can be very confident to utilize this along with your corn, depending on how you're managing that corn rootworm pressure. It does have, we're increasing, we're going to broaden the label. It actually has some activity on other pests as well. So we'll continue to broaden that label as we discover that. Starter. So I talked about the enzymes. So I wanted to talk about the enzymes in the planter box because it does go to our starter. So this is a place that we've really impacted the market in a big way. I was up in North Dakota, and we got some people up there that were selling starter that weren't real happy with us, but they're getting on board because we are now up to almost 10 million pounds of Upshift C as a market in 3 years, which means that's 20 million gallons of starter that was been displaced. And it's because we're able to do it with less salt load, give you the same value, and do it at typically a lesser cost. So what is Upshift C? It's a 1258O. It's a dry soluble. It's pink powder, has a little odor to it. It's because those are the enzymes. It's an ortho phosphate source. It's a 4:1 salt index versus most of the time you're somewhere in the high 20s to 40 salt index. Yes, they're safe to be used in furrow, those starters, but they do still have a lot of salt. And you can influence stands, and you can influence biological activity in that zone where you have a lot of salt. It definitely negatively impacts it. We do maintain availability of the phosphorus source that's in there. We utilize some organic acids and things to protect it. And we did do a bunch of trials. We weren't looking to be any better. We looked at starter and said, why do we use it? We don't use it to build our soils. We use it to get the plant off to a good start. That's why we run 5 gallons in furrow. We use a little bit 2x2. So we just wanted to be as good. So we wanted to test this theory. Brant went out and tested it across a lot of sites for us, and we actually came up a little better in most cases than traditional starter. This was some stuff from the field. This was this year. Some growers sent us these things, a 14 bushel increase over 624.6, 4 bushel increase here over 1034.0, 6 bushel increase here over what they were doing traditionally. So this is a product called OptiStart. I'm not quite sure what that product is, but again, 5 and 7. This is just cream on the crop because you're going to spend less money on this per acre. So again, save you money if we can increase yield, great. But we know we're as good as what you're doing in furrow traditionally, and it's because we're utilizing a phosphorus source to get you that phosphorus that you need immediately, but we're using enzymes to solubilize phosphorus back, like I said in that image. So we can do that 2 ways. We can do that through liquid starter replacement, very easy to use. And we can also do it through the planter box because the enzyme is also exists in that planter box both in corn and soybean. That's the planter. I'll jump quick through kind of how we look at the in-season management and the reasons we do it. So we've got the plant off to a good start. We got everything going. Now Mother Nature is going to really try to kick us, right? Throughout that season, we're going to face a lot of things. So we're going to try to the reason we look at an in-season program is we got to continue to feed that beast, if you will. We want to mitigate stress, influence yield potential, build upon that planter box acre or that starter acre, all the things you've done right to this point to get that plant where it needs to be. Create the largest plant factory, get to canopy. In soybeans, we want to maximize trifoliate development and flowering sites early and induce flowering as low as possible in the plant. That's part of the reason planting date's influencing. So that's one way we can influence flowering early in beans, right? The other way is if we manage it effectively in season, we can induce that plant to flower sooner as well. A couple products, Harvest Yield Complete. If you do one thing foliar nutrition wise on your farm, this is it. Pint per acre, it's not high cost. You can put this out there. It gives you a rainbow of micronutrients to help with photosynthesis, but there's 2 components in it. They're amino acid packages that prime that plant for stress. We've done data work. And this, so you guys know that we're usually try to be as honest as possible. This here, 2 pint rate, which is a quart on soybeans or a pint on soybeans. You see how we measured it, early stages, measured it early during those herbicide passes, about a 5 bushel average. The quart did better, so I recommend a quart in soybeans. You can do a pint. Actually in corn, the pint was better. From an ROI, did the quart out yield the pint? Sure. Did it pay for itself? No. Consistently, the pint will always pay. So that's what we promote. If you're going to run this product, you can run a pint across the acre and be very, very happy with it. Because what we're doing is we're priming that crop for stress, getting it ready to accept that stress. It's not like an immediate, you don't have to worry about what the weather's going to be or not going to be. You're trying to prime it. So we tested it in perfect environments and added stress, and we were able to replicate a perfect environment. That was the testing that was done from a greenhouse perspective, and what got us excited to launch this product, and we've had it out a couple years, and it's been very effective for us. And then we like to layer a plant growth regulator on top of that. If anybody's heard of Nutrients Radiate, if you've heard of Radiate, this is pretty much the same thing. Very, very, very similar. I can't say the same, very similar. Basically boosts root growth, boosts plant growth. So we take that Harvest Shield Complete, mitigate stress. We're going to mitigate that stress for about 14 to 21 days. That plant's going to be primed to take on stress easier than it would otherwise. So it continues turning utilizing photosynthesis to produce sugar versus produce amino acids to mitigate stress, because that's what happens. When there's stress, it has to stop producing sugar to produce those acids, those amino acids and those defense mechanisms. If we prime it, it can keep producing sugar. That factory keeps working, doing what we want it to do. And then we put fuel on the fire by adding this Revline early season, and we boost that plant and continue to grow roots and shoots. And this is what we're after. We're after a larger plant factory, set more rows around in corn, putting on more trifoliates in soybeans, getting that herbicide through that plant as fast as possible to keep it growing. And then as we get to reproductive stage, this is when you finish it, right? This is when you don't give up. Because you've done all that, you've got the plant built, you've got as many groceries stored in that plant as possible, you got the solar panels working. When we get to reproductive stage, now we really need to move those sugars, as Ben mentioned earlier, talking about sugars to the grain, getting source to sink. That's what we're influencing here. And we do that through the use of a product that is specifically formulated with potassium, sulfur, boron, and molybdenum. Because those nutrients are key in mobilizing nutrient source to sink. Some data that we got back from, actually this was Jason, Stanley and John know him. This was local over in Western Illinois. Just by itself, it was a 7 bushel increase at reproductive stages. We like to put Revline late season on top of it, which is a plant growth regulator. It doesn't make the plant grow. It's different than the earlier one. It reduces ethylene glycol production, so it reduces stress, and then it helps mobilize nutrient source to sink. And that's why we use this late. We don't use this early because it won't work for you as well early. It's meant to be used later. When we put those combinations together, here's what we're trying to do. In the summary, we're trying to hold more kernels, hold more pods, keep them from aborting. The more we can hold on to, the more we can fill. And we're also trying to increase kernel weight, seed weight, those kind of things as we get later in the season. Why we select those products we talked about earlier, potassium, boron get in high demand during grain fill. And this is why. Because those sugars that you build into that plant during photosynthesis, stored in that plant, now have to move to the grain. They move through the grain through these cell walls. Boron strengthens cell walls. I consider it kind of like a cattle chute. If you got a weak cattle chute, you got a problem when you're loading or unloading. We want to strengthen that cattle chute, strengthen those cell walls with boron. Molybdenum helps continue nitrogen uptake and utilization. And potassium is your forklift. If potassium's in that crop, it kicks those sugars in the butt, tells them get going, get to the grain. So that's their job. They lift and move sugars. So sugars move, boron keeps cell walls strong, and they move to that grain. If any of that's not in play, or we don't have those levels accurate where we need them to be in the plant, we can leak sugar out, which creates disease, one. And also we don't get that sugar to the grain, which influences test weight and end result of yield. NKBS, we've tested it against a lot of products. So you think, okay, can I just do that with a regular boron product? Can I do that with a regular potassium product? Not necessarily, because NKBS is formulated specifically to enter that leaf tissue very effectively and be used within the plant. It's been tested. Boron, actually, that's a 2-gallon rate. It increased yield, but there's a 1-gallon rate. And then we tested the product at 1 quart versus all of these and came up with the best result. So you can also be confident that the product performs where we say it's going to perform. Revline late season by itself, this is probably our #1 ROI product. I mean, very, very consistent. It's 90% positive ROI coming out of independent research and from farm data. It's been put together over the last few years. It's about a 5% average increase. Very consistent. And again, what we're trying to do is just we got that plant built. We want to keep those solar panels on, keep them running, and drive yield late season and move that sugar source to sink. Another thing we'll do is when you get into pollination, sometimes your plants can get out of sync. You see them pollinate at different times unevenly. You'll actually even out pollination. We've seen that with the planter box where we even out pollination. But as we continue through the season, evening out pollination can actually influence yield because, yeah, that's got the long beard and that's got the short beard. That long beard is not as good as the short beard, right? Because that means we didn't pollinate lower in the corn in that plant. So we actually want to try to also even out pollination, which we can do with a lot of these products by synchronizing that process. High yield management, does it pay? This comes out of Iowa. This was from Shane in Iowa, one of our reps out there, where they did normal versus intensive management. We're talking about this pass right here. This is some normal versus intensive. The two left, that'll be the kind of more normal ears, the 4 on the right being more of an intensive program like what we talked about. Again, building a larger ear, set more kernels, retaining those kernels, and maximizing weight. This was actually local. This is John. John sent me this photo. You'll hear from John here in a little bit. He sent me this photo. You like to play around and mess with, what does that really mean visually? There's fungicide by itself. There's no program. There's a full program we're talking about. Before you even put the combine in the field, which one's probably going to give you the best results? Probably the healthier one. And that's typically the result. So again, think about the system. Think of it as a system. Consider giving at least the system a good try. And love to have the opportunity to work with you guys. Real quick on nitrogen, we also have products for nitrogen management, and they're bio-friendly. I won't spend a lot of time. The only thing I'll tell you is where we manage nitrogen differently than most products, it's not that those products don't do a good job, is when you're putting nitrogen in the soil profile, it's playing plinko, looking for an opposite exchange site. Most products are just trying to inhibit or kill the biological process to convert them to nitrate. We don't want to do that because everything we're talking about today is increasing biological activity, right? Everything. So we don't want to wipe it out. So we want those factor workers to keep working. So our nitrogen management portfolio focuses on placement of N. So if you place N most effectively, you keep it near the root zone, which we can do with this product that has a polymer built into it, we get more uptake. That's the quick, and you'll see that here. We've done that, put that to the test. A lot more nitrate available in the upper edge of the soil profile versus other management practices, and the same amount of ammonium or more. So that's because that food source is where that plant can access it. And we have both above and below ground. So any questions? Thank you for the time.
I'm John Torrance. I'm from Gladstone, Illinois, so I'm local. We farm in 3 different counties, so we have a very wide array of soil types, anything from the best soil you're going to find in the state of Illinois to the poorest irrigated sand you're going to find. So we've got a lot of experience. Different products, are going to help different soil types. Your nutrient needs are going to be different, so we try to combat that a lot. And Meristem's got a really good lineup of products that will help balance soil nutrition, help spike nutrition needs at critical times, things like that. I participate in NCGA a little bit. I do some soybean yield contests. This year I've actually beat my personal best record at 115.5 bushel soybeans, and that was done across 8.5 acres actually. Only required to cut 1.25 acres, but we did it on 8, so that's a pretty big feat. And officially but unofficially, due to some paperwork errors on the NCGA contest, I did break the Illinois State corn record this year at 360, a little over 360 I guess, but we can't put it in print because there were some paperwork issues, unfortunately. But we learned a lot doing those contests, and Meristem's a big part of that for us.
One thing I'd ask you, because I know we've worked together for a long time, so starting out years ago, you weren't doing all those things. So from your perspective, was that always an added cost? Was there times you saw value and maybe substitute some things out? And kind of, I guess more than anything, is there one thing that's more consistent, or is the program across acres, is that kind of the best way to manage the crop from your perspective? Yeah,
to have high yield success, it takes a whole system approach. It's not going to be a silver bullet by any means. And from grower to grower, it's going to be different because we've applied our fertilizers differently. So that's something you really got to look at your soil tests, look at your tissue tests, and you'll learn to balance nutrition if you start paying attention to that. But like the planter box treatment, for instance, on soybeans, early nodulation, early root growth is really pretty amazing. You go do side-by-side root digs, and it's pretty astounding, really.
So from a soybean perspective, what do you feel like you get yield per bushel per acre if you pull that out of the program?
I quit testing it so long ago. I don't know the answer to that because it's just something that you use. It works, but 5 to 7 is not out of the question.
Yeah, I think we did a video. So if you go on YouTube and you Google Meristem, or I think Meristem Crop Performance, you'll find John, where I think it was a couple years ago, there was a video.
Yeah, I think too.
Where it was on that specific question. And one thing that I remember from it, and I'd rather them hear it from you, is you saw, 3 bushel, 5 bushel, 7 bushel on soybeans, and you're already raising high yield soybeans. But it was more about evening out. You saw more through soil types, less variation.
Right.
Talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, so a lot of these products, even in good soil, everybody can raise pretty good yields in good soil, right? But these products really bring the tougher soil up to match that Class A stuff. I spoke that we, farm a very different variation of soil types. And we've got some Class C soil that will out-yield our Class A soil, and it's just, we get that early root growth, which is important, and reduces the stress, really, is a lot of it, so we can get through those drier periods easier in the lighter soils.
So when you're planning your crop plan, and I know there's some things, hey, we talk about Meristem, it's really practices that we know work, right? I was with somebody else before 21, and we had some good products, and we used them. And so I would say where a lot of this information comes from is that we know certain things in these practices work. If you do these things at different times consistently, it will work. We think we've got the best solutions now. We've got it dialed in, but John, there's other things you're incorporating too: fungicides, insecticides, ways you're managing nitrogen trips, things like that are also leading to your success. But in general, I guess I'm keeping highlighted on that system as something, we're in the off season now, we're planning for next year. Right? Last year corn $6, we've had years corn $3, we've had years now we're at $4.40 or whatever it is for next year. Does it influence you as you look at that? How does that influence how you make your buying decisions? And is this type of system something that's just kind of it's just something you do, right? You pencil it in as part of your program.
Right. So, obviously everything gets tighter when commodity prices drop. And, we're talking about adding cost by buying these products where, Meristem likes to talk about in the excavator, for instance, you're getting that fertilizer money back, and they'll tell you can maybe cut back on your actual dry fertilizer spend. And that is true, but still spend the money on the dry fertilizer, but buy the excavator, and you're going to have a better yield because you've got more available nutrients, and they're more efficient nutrients. Now, that's maybe hard to do. Everybody wants to keep their costs in line, but, try that anyway. Maybe try to cut your fertilizer back, put your normal rate on, add the excavator, check them against each other. I think you'd be pretty surprised. I do want to touch on the hopper throttle, though. I asked this question because, and I didn't mean to cut you off earlier when you were talking about it, but biological activity, if you're buying a jug, it's liquid, and it's a biological product, and they're going to sell it to you and tell you it's going to work, it's not. It's already dead. If it's in a liquid form, it's already dead. If you're buying a biological and it's a powder, like what's in this, that biological is dormant. It's activated by the moisture in your soil. That's how that functions. So if you're buying something that's already a liquid form, unfortunately, you're wasting your money.
But when you're going back to that system, like I said, we've been talking for so long about it. Something to try to get you guys to think about is incremental yield is how you outchase commodities, right? I think about the grain business. Remember when Cargill did the grain bin program? Not picking on Cargill. Remember when they did the grain bin program? It was like, what was it, 3 years or 5 years?
Yeah,
how long was that?
I think 5, yeah.
They build you a grain bin, and then you had to sell them the corn that went into it for the next 3 to 5 years or something like that, 5 years. Did they know what the price of corn was going to be on year 4 or 5?
No.
Did they know that every bushel is an opportunity for them to market?
No.
Yeah. So when you think about sitting here today, don't know what that crop's going to be next year, but every bushel is an opportunity to market. Corn today's 440 Ds. 3 months from now, it might be 540. 6 months from now, it might be 240. I don't know, right? But when you think about that, John, and how that impacts your decisions and how your family makes those decisions going forward? Is it based typically around, obviously you have to be efficient, but it's raise as much bushels as you can for as little as you can, right?
Right, absolutely. You know, my, for instance, my 360 bushel corn yield this year, I mean, I spent probably $300 more above and beyond the average producer. But if you're the average producer that's not really spending any money, maybe you do fungicide and that's it. If you made 220 to 240 bushel and I made 360 and I spent $300 more, pretty much no brainer.
Well, that cost of production is what, $1 a bushel?
Right.
That incremental cost. So I'm glad you said, because I say that's not, you meet with the banker and I got my 200 bushel corn and I got my budget that's costing me $4 a bushel to do it. That doesn't sound very fun right now, but that might be the truth. But if you get 25 or 30 more, which we usually see in a corn program like this against an untreated, or you get 10 or 15 more beans, that incremental spend, if you spend $50, John spent $300 to get 100 more, let's just call it, if that which is $3 a bushel, so that's $1 under the production cost, because that lowered, right? That lowered your overall production cost per bushel.
Right.
But that incremental cost was $3 versus the first 200 and something were $4.
Yep.
If we can bring on 25 more for $50, let's just say, that's $2 a bushel. You're sitting there with a $4 a bushel cash flow, and you just moved your incremental. That incremental bushel just costs $2. That's, in a lot of ways, when I've sat down with growers that have been successful at this, the reason they stay with it even when commodities are lower is because they've seen that.
Yeah.
And they just can't afford not to do it.
Meristem's done a good job of, in that pamphlet, they show timings of products, and I think they've done a good job of pinpointing that for growers. A lot of times that's what's actually hard to figure out when you're buying products from, you know, any company. It doesn't matter who it is, but they've done a good job of really lining that out for people, and that's through trial and error. You know, we do a little bit of work and we learn from it, so that's okay. But that is a really good guide. Don't go necessarily stacking everything on there just like they show in that. However, I do that some and it works, but that is something you got to learn about on your own.
Yeah, timing is key, and understanding why you're doing it is key.
So I'll put my farmer hat on, and this isn't a bad thing to say, but it's truthful and realistic. A lot of these products, you're going to grow a bigger plant early, and that's great because you're going to harvest more sunlight. It's going to equate to more yield. But on the back end, unfortunately, if you are extremely dry late, it's going to fall on its face, and you're probably going to see detriment compared to somebody that didn't spend any money at it. But in the 10-year long haul, you're going to be far above and beyond anybody else.
Yeah, I always make the comment, and I love the fact that you surface that, because that's what we want to do is talk real talk, is that you build a bigger plant, it's going to need more food. I mean, it's going to need more food. Just like building a muscle, man, it's going to need more food, need more protein. But that's why the system, hopefully Mother Nature works with us a little bit, and we can stay in the game longer and wait for that rain. And I say 8 times out of 10, you do something like that, 8 years out of 10, if you're farming for, assume your lifetime or for the long haul, 8 years out of 10, it's gonna pay back big dividends. There might be a couple years where it's flat, maybe even like you said, a year where it takes you backwards just a little bit, because we did build this big He-Man that requires some resources.
Yep. And another farmer hat comment, I would say, even if you do this product and maybe it's a one-off year and it just breaks even is all it does. Is that a bad thing? In my opinion, it's not, because you've gained yield and you're going to put that on your insurance 10-year average. So is that worth something? And to me, it absolutely is. So maybe you don't gain yield, but you break even on it 1 year. Well, try it again. You may be successful year 2, year 3. You know, you may really be happy you've done it.
I look at a lot of these products, like I look at starter on corn, or I look at it as like fungicide on corn and soybeans. You know, like what Peter was saying, you may only get the big return on that product 8 years out of 10, but when we're layering different ways of mitigating stress, and we are layering different ways of enhancing yield, which is mitigating stress at the same time. I mean, those two things are essentially the same thing. But when we are going at the crop growth year with multiple different ways of mitigating stress and adding to yield, the likelihood of seeing the return on investment is going to be higher with the more layers you add into that system. So whether it be a seed treatment or any single one of these products, the more things that we do to mitigate stress and add to yield, there's going to be a higher percent chance that the program is going to give you a positive return on investment. So that's why I liked it. The reason that I brought the Meristem brand into Merschman's has some to do with the Gardex corn rootworm, but PGRs, early season, late season, those products come from Stoller. Stoller was bought by Corteva. They have the best PGRs on the market. The foliar products, whether it be the NKBS or the Harvest Shield Complete, those products are brought to you by Brandt. Meristem is passing those products along through their system, and they tweak things because they work faster than Brandt because they're smaller, they're more agile than Brandt is. Those are the two best products when it comes to that same system. I look at Terrasym. Terrasym is a 4-year positive return on investment, Beck's PFR proven product. I look at the different microbes that they have in the bucket. They're pedestrian, but they're the best microbes that are on the market when it comes to that. Zinc is unbelievably important that not a lot of people are using. I look at the high quality stuff that matches the things that Merschman does. I look at building the package together to make sure that we don't trip and fall. And that's the reason that I just don't sell the bucket. That's the reason that I don't offer just one of these products. I offer them to our entire I offer the entire portfolio because I believe that they are the best yield enhancement products on the market. And every single one of you that's in this room has the ability to buy these products from Agrineed, from Thompson's, from the LC Co-op. There's guys, if you own your own sprayer, you can make some of these products work. But all of our dealerships have the ability to spray these products, buy these products, sell these products. And it's if you don't own your own sprayer, you're not out of the woods, because all of our dealers have the ability to move these products and help guide you in the right direction on your high yield journey. So,
yep. I know earlier you mentioned you didn't have any below ground protection on your corn, right?
Yep.
So we have severe corn rootworm issues where we farm, and all across Illinois, get in central Illinois, it's a big issue also. We had gone away from dry insecticide on the planter, and about 3 years ago I decided every planter sold needed to have dry insecticide on it, until this hopper throttle came out. And it's kind of fun for me. We did 1,000 acres worth of side-by-sides on the corn rootworm hopper throttle versus the other half of the planter had dry insecticide in it. And there was zero yield difference between the two. And that excites me because, well, I don't have to throw bags of insecticide. I don't have to worry about going home to my 1-year-old son, covered in insecticide, some kind of harm there. But it's cheaper to buy this hopper throttle just based against the price of the insecticide alone, and you're going to get the added benefits that the hopper throttle has for free. Essentially. Yeah,
I'm glad that you brought that up. I was thinking about it, and I'm glad you brought it up, because from your side, that's your personal experience. What's that? We bought generic insecticide. That's what you were buying. So you're buying it as cheap as possible. A lot of insecticides run mid-20s to 30. I think it was 22-ish an acre. And the Gardex Pale, with all the other goodies, 28-ish range, let's just say, to John's point, you're able to take all that cost, move it to this, and any yield gains, all the stuff that Ben just talked about, all the stuff we talked about, it's gravy on top.
You already put a talc graphite on. It's a practice you already do, so you're just simplifying everything. You don't then have to have your insecticide. You don't have to fill up your starter tank. You mentioned it when you brought it to us. How many people that have starter? I know very few of you maybe do, but you got to pay an extra person to help sit there, fill up your tank, stuff like this. You might not get 100% of the effective starter, but you're going to get 80% of the effective starter, and you are already doing the graft talcite. So it's just multi-practices all in one system. It's easy.
Two comments on that. I was in Texas presenting to a group that cotton farmers. So we have a cotton pail, and we have a rice pail, and peanuts. So it's kind of interesting, some of those spaces. And talking about this, and a farmer come up to me, and they grow corn too afterwards, and high-speed planters, and farms a lot of acres, and says, "I'm so glad you came up with something like this." He says, "I'm going to put it on every acre." So we haven't even tried it yet. He says, "Well, I know starter works. I ain't worried about that." He says, "I just got rid of it because I don't have the labor or the time to do it." He says, "This is going to cost me half of what starter cost me." He says, "So I'm all in." So there's a guy who'd been using starter, right? John, quick, talk about, you were in furrow, really went more of a 2x2.
Right. Yep.
Because of this.
Yep.
You mentioned to me something the other day that I caught on the phone about pinch rows and weight and what that really costs in yield as you start to move the yield up. And maybe I thought of that as a way we can almost influence. Just talk about that a little bit.
We have a 24-row planter. We usually harvest with a 12-row corn head. Unfortunately, we had a gearbox issue, so we ran it an 8-row. Worked out really good when I went to harvest my high yield plot. You know, we farm in the river bottom, some highly compacted soil, so we worry about compaction a lot. It's always on my mind. So I thought an advantage would be to harvest the 8 rows on the wing versus the 8 rows in the center of the planter, right? So I harvested the wing pass, and it's 392 bushel across 1.4 acres. Pretty impressive. Well, you have to weigh twice, right? Unfortunately for the NCGA, I didn't know that. Otherwise, I'd have cut the middle 8 rows first. But the 362 number has to be the official number because that's the second weight, and that was harvested in the middle 8 rows versus the 8 rows on the edge of the planter. So it's just little things like that that make a big difference that you think about. And if you think about things differently, that's how you end up increasing yield in general. Just have a different mindset.
So starter's good. You can keep doing it on the 2x2, but you think about when you get weight on that planter, that was a 30 bushel reduction in yield. And yes, maybe you're not raising 390 bushel corn to get that, but the reason I mention that is this is a way to bring the value of a lot of those things and not maybe pack on more weight, reduce time and labor. You don't have equipment costs. It's not hard on your equipment. Starter's not easy on your equipment. And again, if you are a liquid starter, we have an option for that, but just want to touch on a few things that sometimes we don't monetize in our mind as value.
Absolutely. I would like to go back to the corn rootworm trials a little bit. So we checked corn after being stubble, dry insecticide versus nothing at all on 7 bushel advantage. If you go to corn on corn, it's 20 plus. And our corn rootworm is so bad that corn will just fall over if the wind blows. It's pretty drastic. So the fact that there's no yield advantage of the hopper throttle versus the dry insecticide, I can confidently tell you that being stubble, it's going to probably add 7 bushel, and corn on corn 20 plus possibly, if you have the type of issues we do.
And last comment, you know, we want to thank these guys, and if you have any questions, hold them aside. I know we're right at a little past time. We appreciate you guys coming, but you know, we also have the version without the Guard X, and you can use that on our wheat. And we said, you know, this pail does 50 units of corn. One pail does 250 units of wheat, right?
That's correct.
That's what it does. So we have a version of that. So they said they had peanuts, cottons, and soybeans and all that. The soybeans has the inoculant in it. You know, our Merschman seed treatment, since we treat so early, we don't have the ability to put inoculant and provide it to you living to the field. And so that gives you an inoculant option and improves our seed treatment as well. Just want to say thank you for taking the time this morning.